Now let's talk a little bit about the founding of the church at Rome. It is mysterious. There's a lot of mystery surrounding the origins of the Roman Christian community. It appears this church had been around for some time. And we know that there were some visitors from Rome and Jerusalem, during Pentecost. But we don't have a lot of information about this particular church at Rome. But we do have a passage of scripture in Acts that we can kind of take a look at where we may get some information here. So this is Acts chapter 18, verses 1 through 2. And it says, "Then Paul left Athens and went to Corinth. There he came acquainted with a Jew named Aquilla, born in Pontus, who had recently arrived from Italy with his wife Priscilla. They had left Italy when Claudius Caesar deported all Jews from Rome." I think I briefly mentioned this maybe in the part 1 of our series here, how there was this uprising that happened in Rome. All Jews were deported. Perhaps that's why when Paul writes this letter that he is writing to mostly a Gentile church. When you read the various accounts about Aquila and Priscilla, the Bible never says that Paul preached the gospel to them. What we can sort of glean from that is that Aquila and Priscilla, who come from Rome because they were deported, were already saved. They were already Christians. And the fact that they were kicked out because Aquila was a Jew, everybody got expelled. We see here that they were kicked out. And I got to thinking about something. So this is me just, connecting the dots. Like I said, everything I'm about to say here, I can't prove it because the Bible doesn't say it. We don't know for sure. But perhaps it was this deportation of Jews out of Rome, like Aquila and Priscilla. And Aquila and Priscilla were close to Paul. First of all, they were both tent makers, so they sort of shared the same trade. So you can imagine Paul spent quite a bit of time talking, communing, praying with, discussing. Paul had the gospel on his mind. His brain is saturated with his revelation from Christ as it relates to the gospel. His mind is saturated with Jewish and the Old Testament law and tradition. And because Paul is a master at connecting the two, I'm pretty sure that perhaps they told him about what was happening in Rome. So perhaps maybe Aquila and Priscilla, along with maybe other Jews who were deported that Paul came across. Because if you remember, we talked about Paul wrote the letter of Romans in Corinth. That's where he wrote it from. Perhaps maybe this is where Paul gets his information, because it seems as though Paul is responding to certain things about what's happening at this particular church in Rome. And so all of this sort of study, this kind of particular context just had my mind. It helped me kind of put things together. Again, I don't have information, I don't have knowledge as it relates to if this was the case or not. But as I read commentaries about the book of Romans, most of the scholars all sort of agree that Paul was responding to something to the church in Rome. And one of the issues that Paul did address is that relationship between the Jewish believers and the Gentile believers. Because as the Jews are expelled from Rome, eventually they are allowed to come back. Well, now there may be some contention amongst leadership. There may be some contention about, who has authority as it relates to positions or whatever it is. So we see Paul does sort of address those particular issues. So for me, that sort of makes sense.